React is all about reusable components. And the simpler you can make your components, the better. Now, in version 0.14, React introduced stateless functional components. And these help you write simple, reusable components. Now, stateless functional components are simply functions. And these functions are also known as pure or dumb components, as they have no state. With stateless functional components, you can actually pass in props, and the props will provide data for the component to render. The idea is that you only have a small number, maybe only one smart component that has state, and then that smart component passes properties to the dumb components, the stateless functional components, to render. It's probably easier to show you in an example exactly how stateless functional components work. They are actually very simple, and the more you can use in your projects, the better. I'm going to go ahead and start with a simple example. The example I'm going to use is of a task list. So our smart component is going to have state, and it's going to have just an array of tasks. So we'll call this component the task list. And of course, we're going to use the React library again. This is all hopefully really familiar now, and you really understand this. This of course takes the render method, which is a function, and it returns the content we want to return. So we're going to return a UL, and this UL is going to return each of our task items. This is a smart component, as I said, so it's going to have the state. So we'll initialize the state using getInitialState. Function, don't forget your comma, and this is just going to return an object called tasks. This is going to be an array, and we're going to have an array of objects. So we're going to have a title, so clean the dishes, and I'm also going to chuck in an ID there as well, and we'll see why in a bit. So let's make another task, call this one take out the bins, ID 2, and one more, title change bed, and an ID of 3. Very simple. We'll go ahead and implement the React DOM library and the render method. So the what being our task list. We've got the comma there, and the where being our app. Like that. So you should know what's going on here. Simple component. Obviously, at the moment we're just rendering a UL, so nothing actually in the content here, just an unordered list. But we are actually going to render these items to the list. Now, before we might have done li and then passed in tasks naught.title. So we might have done this .state .tasks naught.title, like so, which is obviously really bad, not great code at all. Don't want to do that. And this is where stateless functional components are going to come in. So they're going to allow us to write reusable components that don't need to mutate state. They don't need to know anything about data or anything like that. They literally just get the props passed into them and then render the props. You can think of a stateless functional component as just a simple render method, basically. It's literally just the return. So all it is just the content we want to return. And we're going to make a stateless functional component for each task. So let's go ahead and make one. So the same way you create a stateful component, a smart component, you create the display name. So var task, that's going to be the name of our stateless functional component. And stateless functional components are simply functions. So function. And if you want to have properties on a stateless functional component, you need to pass in the props, which we do like so. And of course, because it's just a function, all it's going to do is return an li. And we're going to have task of props.title, because we're going to pass in the title of each task. That is a simple stateless functional component. Now I just noticed that I typed getElementById wrong there, lowercase d at the end. So a stateless functional component simply returns some content. It doesn't mutate it, doesn't have any get initial state or get default props, anything like that. It's just pure, dumb, simple function component. Nice and easy. So now we want to pass this task component into the task list component. Now we've not dealt with lists or arrays or anything yet, but they're quite simple to deal with, and we'll do that now. So you can imagine in our UL here, we simply want to have 3 of our task components and pass into the props of those each of these tasks. And we do that using the map function, which I'm going to show you now. So this is JSX, so we're going to put our function in between these curly braces here, and the JSX is going to get rendered to the DOM. So this .state.tasks. So we're using the tasks array here, and we're going to map over that array. Now the map function takes a function, and then you pass in the result of the map function. So we're going to call this on task. So for those of you not familiar with the map function, it essentially iterates through the array you pass it, or the array that you call it on, sorry. And then for each object in the array, it passes the result to another function, and then you do whatever you want in that function. So it's going to iterate over the tasks array, and then the first task is going to pass to the function. It's going to be task 1, and then it'll pass task 2, and then task 3. And then within this, we are simply going to return our stateless functional component. So return our task and close that off. Now, of course, our task needs a title, so we'll pass that in as a property. Now, the result of the map function is our task. So it's going to be task.title, because the task is each individual task object. So this now should render the 3 tasks as list items to our component using our stateless functional component. Let's have a quick look. And there we go. So we've got our 3 tasks here. So now you can see how quickly and how easily it is to make stateless functional components and how reusable they are. So we can use this task anywhere. Think about that. We've got a list item, so we're going to have a million things in our array here, and we just use the same stateless functional component again and again. Really easy, really simple. Now head over to the browser again and open up your developer tools. One thing you'll notice is you get a warning. So each child in an array or iterator should have a unique key property. Now you'll notice I put an ID on each task, and that's because I knew that warning was going to happen. So React needs you or prefers you to have each item, so each item in a list, to have a unique ID so it can identify it. This makes it quicker to render and quicker to know what's going on for React. So all we need to do is pass in the key. So that's the property that React looks for. And then obviously we're going to pass in task.id. So each task item, so each LI is going to have a unique ID, a unique key, which React, the library itself, can identify that as. So this is going to be 1, 2, 3. Let's save that and check it out again. So you see the warning has disappeared now. And if we actually look at the LI elements, click on the right button, expand this. So you actually see you have $1, $2, $3. Don't need to worry about the dollar or anything like that, but you can see that React is using the unique ID to identify each list element. So that is a stateless functional component. Nice and simple. It's just a function that returns some content, and you pass any data that you want that component to render through the props. You should try and use stateless functional components as much as you can. They do give performance benefits for React applications, and Facebook has recommended that you try and use stateless functional components as much as possible. So whenever you see an opportunity to have a component that doesn't need state, use a stateless functional component. Try and build your apps and your components out of stateless functional components, and just have 1 or 2 stateful components that pass data to stateless functional components. It might be a bit daunting at first, but you'll certainly get used to it. And in the next video, we're going to refactor the counter challenge to use a stateless functional component. So you'll be able to see a real application of a stateless functional component on something you've built. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed my video, please like, share, and subscribe. If you've got any comments, suggestions, or ideas for videos, leave them in the comments below. Send me a tweet at Codewithtim, or send me an email, codewithtim@gmail.com.